What is going on, everybody? Welcome to the thing's still going.
Is it? Shouldn't be going.
Oh, no.
Music?
I blew it because my YouTube was playing. I blew it because my YouTube was playing. All right, pretend that didn't happen, and we're going to edit that out. Welcome to this week's edition of Off the Bench. My name is Patrick Gustafson, alongside the star of our show, Benchwarmer. What the hell are you wearing? What? For those of you not watching the stream right now, but Brandon has a blonde wig and a number 16 headband. I'm not really sure why, Brand. Why don't you explain to our beautiful listeners?
Yeah. So for those of you with sharp minds, you will recall I donned the same outfit on Halloween. That was fun, other than that this got itchy after a while. However, I am now donning it as essentially our punishment for Pat has committed atrocities in the off-the-bench Civil War. He has beaten me. I am very depressed. I have fallen to 9-2 on the season. And folks, who else would be at the center of these atrocities other than Trevor Lawrence, a man who I had the pleasure to meet a few months ago, and he decides to have his best game of the season by a goddamn country mile against me. And not only did he do this against me, he did it in the first week where I sort of wholeheartedly, without a doubt, benched Calvin Ridley. He was at the forefront of all of Trevor Lawrence's passing production. But folks, forget the passing production. This guy decided to turn into Lamar Jackson. I mean, the yardage wasn't there, but the 2 rushing touchdowns led him to 32 points on the week, and basically being the difference. I mean, I think you probably could have beaten me regardless. I think you ended up winning by like 20 something. If Trevor had his normal point total, this would have been like a 5 or 6 point game. And
I won by 23. So yeah, it would have been. I would have been sweating a lot harder Sunday and Monday night. And it's funny because, after losing last week and he laid an egg, I was 5-5, and I kind of just said to myself, okay, whatever happens, happens. Like, I'm not really going to go above and beyond and, really stress myself out. And I'm like, it's either him or Will Levis, so I'm still going to start Trevor. I didn't really think about it, but I was also kind of just like, whatever. And now I'm back in because our standings are a bloodbath. Bran has clinched, and then there are 3 teams eliminated from 12 teams, and then I believe we've got like 4, 7, and...
Yep, 4, 7, and 4 teams. You are the lone wolf at 6 and 5, and then there are 3, 5, and 6 teams.
So, and only 4 teams make the playoffs in our league, which I actually really like that. I don't like it right now, standing where I am.
You're
but I really like that because, truly the best of the best. Like, it's a really difficult playoffs to make, and also when you make it, it's just that much more rewarding. But yeah, in spite of, Thursday night, man, I was on DEFCON 3 already after Mark Andrews goes down on the first drive, and then Gus Edwards sitting on my bench because, I kind of said, oh, whatever. Of course, has to pop off. I'm like, of course this would happen. I'm like, Brandon, the biggest Gus Edwards hater I know. Of course this is going to happen now where, he's sitting on my bench and I lose. But it all turned out okay thanks to Trevor and the boy Tyreek Hill and David Montgomery, Puka. Oh, Puka. Yeah. I was very angry at Puka for most of the game. I was like, I'm never starting this guy again. I'm like, this guy's never touching my lineup again. 15 points. So it was a roller coaster of a day, and it basically kept me alive. I'm now playing 2 guys below me in the standings. But I still have a scenario where I could probably win out and not get in. We haven't really crunched the numbers yet, but with just all the activity up top, I'm assuming there is a scenario in which I don't get in at 8-5.
Yeah, it's a little tough to kind of nail down what the scenarios are, even with 2 weeks remaining, just because there's so much, friendly fire that is going to go on within the league. And by friendly fire, I mean teams who are all in playoff contention facing each other. So it's like, what sort of records are already out of the question for people? Like, it's not like everybody above you can win out. Like, that's not a feasible scenario with people playing each other. So what needs to happen at this point, Pat? Obviously, you're just trying to control your own destiny as much as you can.
That's
just
all I can do.
Win these last 2 games and see what happens. I find it hard to fathom you getting to 8 wins and not being able to make the playoffs, but stranger things have happened in this league. We have a lot of bottom feeders. So
the way my season has gone too has been, it would be very on brand. That's what I said to him. I'm like, Trevor's now going to let me down so badly this week, and I'm just going to be 6-6 and basically done. So we got to trudge forward, but I'm also in the position now where I do not have an active tight end on my roster. We'll talk about that soon. We'll talk about that. A lot of injuries. We'll talk about that soon. Maybe some tight ends to target, but what, Brandon? Don't forget the overlay here on the thing you always forget.
Oh, yes, you are correct. We will get into it right about now. And how else could we do it with none other than Ron Burgundy?
Good evening. I'm Ron Burgundy, and this is what's happening in your world tonight.
I remembered. I think it's like the first time in a month I played that soundbite. All right. We do actually have some news, though, that is, not fully related to the games that happened this past week, so we're leading off with that, Pat. Number one, without question, Matt Canada has been fired. Steelers fans have been put out of their misery. Look, first, Pat, you got put out of your misery when Josh McDaniels got canned. Now it's Steelers fans put out of their misery. I think next up on the list is Brandon Staley, but we'll see how that goes. For right now, we are talking about Matt Canada.
Stop asking that question.
It's a defensive ass weirdo. For now, it's Matt Canada finally giving Steelers fans, some optimism by him no longer being in the building. Some of the least creative play calling you will ever see from an offense, and now he is out of the building. Pat, the Steelers actually averaged 16.6 points per game, which is fifth worst in the NFL after only the Giants, the Patriots, the Jets, and the Panthers. And I don't know if you're aware, Pat, most of those teams are nowhere near competitive. I mean, the Jets are relatively, they're on the outside looking in. They got a prayer. But the three other teams there are not even close to contention. So it's a miracle that these Steelers are 6-4. To me, the Steelers basically did what we talked about as a hypothetical with Arthur Smith. He was either last week or the week before, where it's like you need to be thankful about the position you're in because it is a lucky thing that you are still relatively high up in the standings, and you need to move on from whatever is holding you back at this point to save that position and make the most of it. And I think that's what the Steelers are doing here. They realize they're 6-4, and it is clearly in spite of Matt Canada, not because of him, and they've moved on. And now I think it just creates some renewed optimism for really every Steeler.
Did you see that video? I don't remember when it was, but it was a couple weeks ago after a win where like Matt Canada daps a guy and Chris Boswell goes, "It ain't because of you." Yeah. Like you've got your kicker trash talking a guy 5 feet away from him. Yeah. And also Najee Harris's comments after the game were very ominous, just that, like, there's more going on behind the scenes. I feel like we're starting to get a little predictable. It was clear that this was so beyond repair. Like, you see guys losing the locker room, but for a guy to lose the locker room this publicly, is something that we probably haven't seen. Like, I thought about it like this must be what it felt like for, when the Raiders fired Josh McDaniels, but it's probably even sweeter for Steelers fans, in my opinion, because they probably should have canned him in the offseason going into this year. They were, they did make no, they didn't. They just missed the playoffs last year, right?
Last year, I know they were above 500 because that's the Steelers way.
They made the playoffs.
They may have missed the playoffs. I'll double check that while you're.
But like they pulled out at least an above 500 record. But
yes, 9-8 missed the playoffs.
Yeah, so they still had an okay season, but it was in spite of an offense that just was doing nothing. But now, I think this is also good for the Steelers too, because we need to see what Kenny Pickett can do. Because you've kind of shit on Desmond Ridder a bit, but it seems like Kenny Pickett is in the same boat where it just might not be it for this guy. He has. Obviously, you could blame it on the play calling all you want right now, but Kenny Pickett just may not have it, and we'll find out here in these last handful of weeks. Is Kenny Pickett someone that they can move forward with in the future? And my guess would probably be no. At least judging right now, I would say no. Like, I think they would need to move in a different direction.
Yeah, there are plenty of stats out there that are just massive indictments of Kenny Pickett. I'll try to remember. So I know one of them is Danny. Tommy DeVito already has more multi-touchdown games in his career than Kenny Pickett does in the 2 games that he has played. And also, I believe it was touchdown rate. It was like Kenny Pickett is below 2%, and there's only 2 other quarterbacks ever who were that low through this long in their career thus far. Kenny Pickett has not shown the development that we wanted to see. So yeah, it's definitely going to be a talking point of if there's any sort of improvement with Matt Canada gone, and even if there's enough of an improvement to warrant you hitching your wagon to him beyond this season, because the Steelers, they kind of have a similar formula as the Browns, I guess, where it's like the quarterback play has not been what you want, but the rest of the team has just been good enough that it's keeping everything afloat. And so it makes fans of that team and fans of the league in general curious, what would these teams look like with actual average or even above average quarterbacks, and I just think there's no real proof that that's what Kenny Pickett's been. Yeah, I've shit on Desmond Ridder plenty because I just had basically zero expectations for the guy as a third-round pick, and I was like, look, he's not the guy, get him out of here. Kenny Pickett's a guy I've given a little bit of a leash to because of the higher, pedigree of first quarterback selected in his class. Just kind of shows that class was probably not very good. But hey, maybe Kenny Pickett will make me eat my words over the next few weeks at the very least.
Yeah, that's the same class.
Yeah, I think you're right. So, Sam Howell didn't end up being the best one.
I feel like he's got the best chance of having staying power, and he's just very inconsistent at this point. But at least we've seen a very high ceiling. We haven't really seen that from Kenny Pickett, and even less so from Desmond Ridder, I would say. But I think another big question here is that what will this mean in terms of Jaylen Warren? Because this week more than ever, that was all over Jaylen Warren. Over 100 yards on the ground, a touchdown, and Najee Harris, I believe, had 12 for 33. So it just showed, Najee's inefficiency, as well as Warren just being a much better and much more dynamic player. Is this kind of that thing to finally tip the scale in the right direction towards Jaylen Warren? And what do you do if you have Najee Harris?
Yeah, it's like, will, a new offensive system, I mean, it's not going to be a massively new system, but will at least a new guy at the head of that side of the ball mean good things for Najee Harris, or will it mean that, he's going to fully unleash Jaylen Warren? Jaylen Warren's been a guy that has consistently produced despite how bad Matt Canada's been. Maybe the only player on the offense that has had, I don't think any player on that offense has had as few duds as Jaylen Warren has had this season, which is insane considering he has not fully been given the keys to that backfield. Yeah. So he's just producing despite that. Now, how much could he produce if they really said, hey, this is your backfield now? I don't know, and I don't know if that happens even with Matt Canada gone, but all I do know is that it can't be anything but good news, right, for Matt Canada to be gone. Yeah. Even though he's been producing despite him, I don't foresee this being like a Ramondre Stevenson situation where it's like, okay, your OC was terrible and then they get rid of him and it turns out, oh, that old OC actually played to your strengths. No, Jaylen Warren is actually just a well-rounded, good football player, and any sort of improvement in play calling will be beneficial for him, for a guy that's already been a viable flex, if not a solid RB2 for basically the entire year. So Jaylen Warren train will probably continue to chug along. The Najee Harris train, though, after another bad week here, and I know it was against the Browns, but that train is definitely sputtering. So we will have to see what it holds for Najee.
Like I always say when people ask, oh, do you like this guy? I say, like, when it comes to drafting, I say, everybody has a price. I would take anybody at a value. But honestly, Najee Harris was the closest guy that I said to, like, I'm not touching this guy at all. Mm-hmm. Because we saw that when he really excelled, he was getting tons of volume and tons of passing volume, too. Big Ben was feeding him the ball. And that just seemed unsustainable. But another thing, this whole Steelers thing, outside of Bill Belichick, is Mike Tomlin the best coach of this era? So like, that guy has made something out of nothing so many times, and I get they haven't really reached super high highs in recent years, but even the fact they went 9-8 last year, the fact that they're very much in the conversation this year, the guy's got a Super Bowl, 16 consecutive non-losing seasons to start his career. I mean, this guy, in my opinion, maybe besides Andy Reid, but I think Mike Tomlin is a surefire Hall of Famer when he decides to hang it up. But that could be a long time from now. But I think this just goes to show how good of a coach he is. But, like, if they keep living in mediocrity 9-8 or so, like, when does that become time for change?
Yeah, it's a valid question. I mean, it's something that obviously, is being talked about in New England, where Belichick is probably out after this year because of just a few bad seasons that weren't up to par. But yeah, Mike Tomlin's still one of the greatest coaches of our generation. I think Andy Reid would probably have something to say about that as well. But there's also something to be said for, look, Andy Reid has won Super Bowls in multiple places now, and he has also lost a locker room in a sense with Philly. I mean, look, there was a reason he had to go, right? Whatever it was, and coaches leave all the time and then they catch on somewhere else and do very, very well. This is not anything to knock Andy Reid whatsoever, but that hasn't happened to Mike Tomlin.
And much like Andy Reid, if they ever did move on from Mike Tomlin, there will be a very long line of suitors, and rightfully so. But this division, I know you just posted a video of kind of the clusterfuck that is the AFC North, and this division is so up for grabs after 11 weeks, and I guess it kind of moves us. We're saving that. We're saving that for later. I almost tried to do a segue. I just blew it twice already, blowing it tonight.
Terrible. Terrible.
The only thing I do
butchering it.
well is beating you in fantasy football, apparently. I don't know.
Oh, toxic. Also, I did also misspeak and said that Andy Reid won a Super Bowl in multiple locations. Unless we're counting his assistant coaching job in Green Bay as another
Doug
one. Which
Peterson in Philly, right?
I could do that. It was Doug Peterson. I had that timeline off a little bit. Nonetheless, Andy Reid, incredible coach. One thing before we move on, Pat, about Najee Harris, you mentioned how Big Ben kind of funneled targets through him in his first year, and that was kind of what made him elite. Yeah, I noticed that earlier today when I was making that video on the AFC North, was that Najee Harris, Pat, is really been the same player his whole career and has just been strictly volume based. I mean, you look at the yards per carry each of his 3 seasons. It's 3.9, 3.8, and 3.9. The only difference is that in that first year, he had 94 targets compared to 53 last year and is on pace for about 50 again this year. So this is just who he is. He's just kind of a plotter. He's not really going to make explosive plays, and I don't think he's going to be a guy that is leading this backfield for much longer, potentially not even beyond this year.
And when it comes down to his rookie contract being up, which I don't know if 5th-year option, but this is year 3 for him, so they'll have to make a decision on his 5th-year option next year. I can't see a world in which they will pick that up, especially when they have a much cheaper and, quite frankly, a much better player in Jaylen Warren.
Yeah, Jaylen Warren is Gen Z Austin Eckler, as the kids like to say, which I would completely agree with.
Oh, I dig that.
Pat,
Wait, a Gen Z
some
who?
other news. Gen Z, a friend of the Off the Bench podcast and esteemed guest, Austin Eckler.
Oh, Austin Eckler. That's right.
I know you forget sometimes. Yeah, it's
thank
okay.
you for reminding
you just
me.
need the reminder that Austin Eckler was on the show one time. Okay, some other news we had that came out of Sunday's games, Pat. Zach Wilson finally benched. Jets fans also being put out of their misery, but maybe not really because we don't know exactly how much of an upgrade this backup is going to be. But we do know one thing about this new starter, Pat, that being Tim Boyle.
Yes.
He is UConn's finest. He spent some time at UConn, although that was not the school he was drafted directly out of, and I keep forgetting where the fuck he came from.
Eastern Kentucky.
Eastern Kentucky, thank you. But Tim Boyle, UConn's finest, and also now creates 2 NFL starting quarterbacks from Xavier High School in Connecticut, which is just a hilarious stat.
I used to work with a guy who crossed over between both of them. Like, he was a freshman when Boyle was a senior, and then when he was a senior, Levis was a freshman, but Middletown, Connecticut, rise up, guys! Like, let's go.
I mean, hey, just a quarterback hotbed, Connecticut. These random towns, huh?
And I know we talked about this a few weeks ago with Tyson Bagent in terms of, like, how does a guy like this get into the NFL?
Yeah.
But more importantly, how does a guy like Tim Boyle stay in the NFL? Because granted, he did start a couple of games in Detroit a few years ago. He was nothing special in college.
Yeah.
It's like this guy just must be a really good locker room guy or just a really good guy to have in the QB room. But hell, that's going to make you a good amount of money if you're Tim Boyle at this point. I mean, Aaron Rodgers clearly loves him. I guess he's the guy's understudy. So, like, but it's just so puzzling to me that a guy that was terrible at UConn and then didn't have great, at least, like, touchdown. I believe he had a bad touchdown to interception ratio, I believe, in college. But, like, how does a guy like that
I have it up right now.
Let's hear it.
His UConn stats specifically, for whatever reason they don't have his Eastern Kentucky stats. His UConn stats were 1 touchdown and 13 interceptions over some mixed action over 3 years.
Great googly moogly.
And this is a guy who is now a starting quarterback in the NFL and has been a backup quarterback in the NFL for, 5-6 years now? Like, it's fascinating what he's been able to do.
Yeah. Let's
so
see.
shout out to Tim Boyle. I mean, man,
as a
Connecticut
redshirt
just
senior, he started all 11 games, 2,134 yards and 11 passing touchdowns. They don't have the interceptions here. I have to click the stats instead of Eastern Kentucky's propaganda on their website.
Sorry, Tim Boyle's Eastern Kentucky stats are apparently not easy to access. Who would have thought that this quarterback that literally only we care about, and maybe the Jets now, I guess, but no one else has ever cared to look up this man's stats in their entire
13
life.
picks. So yeah, wait a minute. He had 11 touchdowns and 13 picks. And did he even get drafted? Did he?
I don't think so. No, undrafted in 2018.
Okay, so like, I mean, I guess good on him for, being able to latch onto a team and then have staying power and to be a point where obviously one of them in Detroit was for injury, but now to be a better option than another NFL quarterback right now. But Zach Wilson is miserable. Like, that Jets team, the fact that they still are like gasping for air in the playoff race is insane. Their defense has been so good, but offensively just nothing has gone on. Like, you think, again, like,
Yeah.
Robert Saleh's got to be on the hot seat. Is Mike LaFleur? No, they already fired Mike LaFleur, didn't they? Oh no, it's fucking Nathaniel Hackett, isn't it?
Yes, it's Nathaniel Hackett.
Yeah, it's
yes.
so they can't even really scapegoat Nathaniel Hackett the same way they scapegoated Mike LaFleur. I guess as the year gets later, we'll talk more and more about coaches' seats getting hot. But again, I think Robert Saleh's kind of coaching for his job, and he's like, hey, this may not be good, but it's different. And even if it's bad, it was bad before.
Yeah, might as well see what Tim Boyle's got. And Pat, I did do some research on how exactly he may have gotten an NFL job. Because, look, with Bajan, it was as simple as he got invited to the Senior Bowl, and, it makes people do a little extra look at his numbers. I mean, he was also, the most productive D2 quarterback of all fucking time. So, that's different. Tim Boyle being terrible raises more questions, and he was not at the Senior Bowl. Apparently, and this Reddit comment, I think, describes it pretty well. The consensus is that he's an idiot savant. He understands X's and O's better than anyone, but can't play for shit, which, respectfully, Pat, seems to be what UConn is pretty good for, because Dan Orlovsky's really good at breaking down the game, but man also led an 0-16 Lions team. So, I mean, that's got its value, right, to a team, like a guy who understands everything that's going on, but just can't actually play on the field. As a backup, that's a great asset. As a starter, I don't know. We might get some Trevor Siemian action here before the season's over. He's going to be the second string now.
I may be losing it, but I believe he might have started another Thanksgiving game before.
Tim Boyle?
Or was that, who was that other guy? David Fales or something?
David Blau?
David Blau.
David Blau.
Maybe I'm thinking
Lions
about him.
backups.
Because I know for a fact he started the Thanksgiving game in Detroit. So, I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah. I don't know what to think about the Jets offense going forward. It's one thing to say that for the Steelers, all their offensive players have some renewed optimism with Canada gone. I don't know if there's renewed optimism for the Jets players, just in the sense of it can't possibly be worse, right? But it might be. So we'll see how it goes. It can't be much worse at the very least. But hey, shout out to Connecticut with Tim Boyle and Will Levis starting quarterbacks now in the NFL. It may not last long, but it is happening right now. Pat, plenty of injuries that we have to sadly go through. It was a bloodbath this past week, and it started on Thursday, which I'll save this rant for another day because I don't even think anybody needs convincing at this point. But Thursday Night Football's got to go. These players are not rested. Unless it's two teams coming off a bye, Thursday Night Football should not exist.
And that's not happen.
And that's not to blame it for Burrow's injury specifically, because, it's a wrist injury. I don't know that that's, affected by lack of rest time. But all these there were so many injuries throughout that game, including one to Mark Andrews. But we'll talk about Joe Burrow first, Pat. Out for the year with a torn ligament in his wrist. Joins a just ever-growing massive list of quarterbacks who are done for the year.
Yeah, man.
Joe Burrow, Deshaun Watson, Kirk Cousins, Anthony Richardson, Daniel Jones. Aaron Rodgers, TBD. We thought he was done for the year. Who the fuck knows what's going on there?
He is.
This is a lot of quarterbacks out for the season, just Joe Burrow joining them. And
vaxxed?
I'm so over Aaron Rodgers' weird conspiracy bullshit. Whatever.
And talking about people's conspiracy theories that he actually, and then he's like, "Oh, that's ridiculous to say that's a conspiracy. That's just a conspiracy." Yeah, motherfucker, you love those.
I think I addressed it pretty well in the video I made yesterday, where I was like, Aaron Rodgers tried to say that him lying about his torn Achilles, it was funny that people would believe that conspiracy but not believe a vaccine conspiracy. I was like, motherfucker, it's a lot easier to believe that you would just lie to people than it is that a government and medical industry would pull off some massive conspiracy. Whatever. Off track. Joe Burrow's out for the year. How does this affect the Bengals players? Negatively, I think that's fair to say, especially if you've got a guy like, Joe Mixon, who is not really much of a make a big play on his own type of guy anymore. He's kind of a go as the offense goes, fantasy asset at the very least. And now this offense is not going to go as well as it once did. But I think most of people's questions probably revolve around Jamar Chase. And look, I think it's a fair comparison to bring up Devontae Adams, right? You've got an elite receiver, and we've seen him play with absolute bottom barrel quarterback play. And I don't think we should expect much more than that from a guy like Jake Browning. He did look pretty solid in relief of Burrow. He made some nice throws, but just not a guy that you're going to consistently expect can support Jamar Chase for the numbers that you're expecting from him. I think you got to downgrade him. He's probably a way at the back end wide receiver one at this point. And understand that you could get absolute duds like you almost did on Thursday night if not for that late touchdown. He was going one catch. He was going on his AJ Brown shit up until the very end of that game where he saved it with a touchdown.
But you've got to assume that unless Jake Browning is Tommy DeVito a couple weeks ago where they would not let him throw the ball. You'd think he's probably going to find a favorite target, and you've got to hope it'll be Jamar Chase. Like, I feel like that's kind of the one, thing you're grasping at if you're a Jamar Chase owner here, saying that, like, well, just hopefully Browning really hooks up with him. And again, there's a lot of good weapons around them. I don't think they're gonna make the playoffs now, but like I wouldn't be surprised. Like I think it's possible that they can get there under Jake Browning, but it's gonna be far more in flux now than with Joe Burrow. And also, like, now Zach Taylor's gonna be in hot water because he didn't like report a different injury to Burrow, and he's like, oh, this injury was unrelated. Situation. And I forgot who tweeted it, but they said, like, I'm not saying Zach Taylor's a liar, but I'm saying that Zach Taylor literally lied to everyone about something else right before this. So, like, but that's a tough look. And, I mean, Burrow was finally getting back to being one of the most reliable, one of the reliable starting quarterbacks. When we've talked about it all year, those have been really hard to come by outside of the top few. And even some of the top characters have not been as good as they have in the past. So, again, a huge blow to fantasy owners, a huge blow to the Bengals, and just yikes.
Yeah, really just one of those hit the brakes type of injuries. I mean, you don't see too many, thankfully, like superstar players go out for the year midseason. Like we've seen a bunch of these guys go on short-term IR, and obviously Justin Jefferson's going to end up missing like 7 or 8 weeks when it's all said and done, but you don't typically see a team's season basically end right before your eyes with an injury like this to Joe Burrow. Look, maybe Jake Browning will prove us wrong. I mean, we were writing the Vikings obituaries as well, and Josh Dobbs came in, and well, not only Josh Dobbs, but Josh Dobbs comes in and gives some renewed hope to them. So maybe Browning will be good, but that division is so tough, and now again with the Steelers looking like they may be even more competent now with a new, start at offense. I don't know how the Bengals climb out of where they already are, which is the basement. It'd be one thing if they had a slight lead in this division, but they don't.
And especially the fact that those 3 defenses in that division have been so good. So good. Like, it's not like you're going to be facing any cupcakes in that division. Like, those games are going to be all-out wars, and Jake Browning probably doesn't have what it takes to keep up to that. But like you said, we were wrong. Not wrong, but I mean, Josh Dobbs kind of pulled the Vikings out of presumed death. Maybe Jake Browning can do the same. I don't know. Obviously, we haven't seen him. But the other thing, too, is that they were confident enough when Burrow had the calf injury. They did not bring in another quarterback.
Yeah.
They were essentially ready to go into the season with Jake Browning at quarterback, which does show at least some kind of vote of confidence in him. But we'll see this week what he's doing, what he can do in a full game action. But that's all you can do right now.
Yeah, I was surprised to see some people like asking if the Bengals were going to sign a new quarterback, and I'm like, I don't see any reason to sign a quarterback that, hasn't been in this system for, I think, over a year now. You're going to bring in a guy and try to reteach him the playbook, and Jake Browning is going to be mid. We know that, but every quarterback that's a free agent is also going to be mid, and they're not going to know the playbook. So just go with Jake Browning and see where he can get you.
For sure.
The Bengals' upcoming schedule is at home against the Steelers, at the Jaguars, at home against the Colts, at home against the Vikings, at the Steelers, at the Chiefs, and at home against the Browns. So a ton of divisional games, and then some non-divisional against the Jaguars and the Chiefs. It is going to be tough sledding for them to get into the playoffs. I think the dream's probably dead for them this year. And it sucks, too, because it's not like they're going to be able to put themselves in position for a super high draft pick. I remember when Burrow had initially hurt the calf and people were like, oh, is he going to be out for the year? They're like, oh, well, the Bengals could just tank this year and go get Marvin Harrison and make a fucking ridiculous super team with the Bengals. But they're going to end up being more of in no man's land as far as the draft is concerned. So unfortunate situation here for the Bengals. Pat, the other injury, obviously, in that game, Mark Andrews is likely, no pun intended, you'll understand that, likely out for the year with an ankle/leg injury. Now, Harbaugh did say that he could potentially return, and he didn't necessarily give a timeline, but most people are speculating that if he were to return, it would be like AFC Championship game or Super Bowl sort of situation. Require a deep playoff run. Pat here was saluting Mark Andrews, who has served his team very well up to this point.
Last 4
sucks
years.
To see him go out. Yeah. You are like a Mark Andrews investor.
I did not have him last year, but I had him the 2 years before, and I had him here, and I've been so spoiled because in such a bad position, do you know how nice it is to not have to worry? Like, obviously,
this is the first year I feel that way. So
he's had his dud weeks, but still, like, you live with that. Tight end's a tough position. They're touchdown dependent, especially in a non-PPR league like ours. But but the dude is just so rock steady, and he's been so rock steady, and it is going to be tough for one. It's going to be tough for them to replace him, and obviously, a lot of the talk now is Isaiah Likely, but I have not only pumped the brakes, I have slammed the brakes on Isaiah Likely. Because now this is the second game, because Andrews missed the opener, and then he missed all but one drive. And Likely has had no production at all.
Yeah.
It seems that the usage has gone exclusively to the wide receivers, which is great if you're a Zay Flowers owner, if you're an Odell Beckham owner, but obviously he's banged up now. Even guys like Nelson Aguilar are getting more work, and then obviously the running back. So it just seems that it's not that they lean on the tight ends, they just lean on Mark Andrews.
Yeah.
And it's not to say that Isaiah Likely won't be good. It's like, if you have Mark Andrews and you need a tight end, Isaiah Likely is probably your best bet on the waiver wire right now to get a tight end one. But still, at that point, you're just throwing a dart, and I don't think there's a great chance, I almost said likely, I don't think there's a great chance that he is even close to Andrews' production. But if you're like me in a position like that where you have no other tight ends on your roster, you've got to do whatever you can at this point.
Yeah, you have no choice. I mean, he's a better bet than some of these other tight ends you could go after. I mean, I've got him listed here, Pat. Like, guys who are likely available in most leagues at this point. There's like Cade Otton, Michael Mayer, Luke Musgrave, who I wrote down earlier in the day. But yeah, he's just been in the hospital all day.
He's been in the hospital on and off this week.
So we're just probably going to take Luke Musgrave off the list for now. But
I will say I would rather have Cade Otton than Isaiah Likely if I had to.
Okay.
It's just shown that he's been more involved in that Tampa offense and great in the red zone. Like, you know it. If anything, there's a good chance he's going to score a touchdown. Michael Mayer, he's been okay. I mean, he's pretty good for, like 40-ish yards. Again, that's not great. That's not great though. That's not great, and that's the problem in our league, like the tight ends. I had a dream last night that everyone picked up every starting tight end. So like all I had was like fullbacks with tight end eligibility. I had to pick up Patrick Ricard. That was what in my dream, that's what I had to do. But
hey, maybe Patrick Ricard to the moon with Mark Andrews out. You never know.
Another name, interestingly, is going back to that game is Tanner Hudson on the Bengals there. Again, obviously he hasn't really. God, my page is freezing. Come on. Okay, there we go. We can scroll now. The last few games here, he had four catches on 5 targets, 45 yards. 6 catches on 7 targets for 33 yards, then 4 catches on 4 targets for 49 yards, which led the Bengals in receiving. That's not bad. That's not bad. And to my point about like Jake Browning, if maybe Jake Browning can kind of get a liking to Tanner Hudson here, it's not a terrible option. But again, the Bengals have never really been a team to incorporate a tight end basically since Tyler Eifert left. Like they've really been looking for a tight end ever since, and it's not been Irv Smith, but it is a wasteland out there. Like Daniel Bellinger's another name that I've kind of seen where it's like, yeah, but that offense is so bad. So like, you're just grasping at straws. I'll just let you know, I've got 4 claims in already this week. 3 of them are tight ends.
I'm not surprised that 3 of them are tight ends.
It is desperate times have called for desperate measures. But if like a guy like Taysom Hill's available in your league, go crazy. Do everything in your power. You know, but if you want to find like a reliable weekly tight end start to replace Mark Andrews, unless your league is unserious, you are not going to find that. Flat out.
No, you're not. I mean, look, Taysom Hill is a guy he's been rostered in our league all year, but he is owned in right around 50% of ESPN leagues, so he might be available for you. I'm still trying to parse through whether I agree with you on the Otton versus Likely take, and again, it's really splitting hairs. It's 2 guys who are probably going to have, virtually identical production in terms of total points over the rest of the season. It's just kind of pick your poison here and which one you feel is the better bet. Because you pull up Cade Otton, I mean, basically every tight end you're considering now is going to be a guy who averages between 4 and 6 targets a game, right? And I mean, in his last several games, it's been 5, 3, 9, 6, 6, 2. At
least he has that potential, though.
He does, but it makes me curious because, Likely this year has not done anything. I mean, he had 1 target in week 1 when Mark Andrews wasn't there, and then he had 2 targets this week. Last year, he did have 7 and 5 targets in the 2 games that Mark Andrews missed, but that brings into question, is that a result of the new offensive coordinator? Is this because, Todd Monken is here now that he just doesn't want to funnel things through Likely as much as, and funnel is generous with the 7 and 5 targets, but you know what I mean? Just making it where if Mark Andrews is out, he's just going in another direction. We know that Monken got brought in basically to elevate the wide receivers and make Lamar have a legitimate passing game. So maybe this is a result of that.
Because it's not even like he's had less production. He has been a non-factor He has been a complete non-factor in that offense. But at the same time, like, I feel like Isaiah Likely should be owned in every league just for
definitely.
the potential of it. And if you go a couple weeks and he stinks, send him off your roster. But he definitely has a higher ceiling than some of those other guys. But again, I think it's just the fact that we've seen his floor, and his floor is the center of the earth, as opposed to a guy like Cade Otton, who at least is going to catch a few balls, probably near the end zone. But and again, I've been really fortunate in every other league because, like, I've got some George Kittle, I've got some Travis Kelce, I've got some Evan Engram, I've got some Dalton Kincaid. Like, I have not had to worry very much all year. And now, of course, I'm going to be just absolutely scraping the bowels of hell for a tight end for the rest of the year. But it's going to test my ability as a fantasy football player here. And I'm kind of up for the challenge here to see if I can kind of piece this together. I'm not. I won't. But I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, it feels like would likely, and this was kind of my first thought when Andrews went down too, and I was like, okay, everybody's going to be going for Isaiah Likely regardless of what he does in this game tonight. It's just an incessant effort to make Isaiah Likely happen when it doesn't seem like it's going to happen. Like, even if he becomes worth your pickup, it's not going to be because he broke out in some big way. And like when Isaiah Likely got drafted by the Ravens, I remember there was talk of like, okay, they're going to run both tight ends. Like, Likely is such a good player.
You drafted him last year?
Isaiah Likely?
Yeah, I believe you drafted him late. Was that last year?
Yes. I think he was my Mr. Irrelevant last year, or maybe the year before.
I think it was last year. I picturing
whatever
the
it
draft
was
where it happened. That was last year.
I had a lot of high hopes for him. On the back of that narrative, which was that they could use two tight ends because he was such a good receiving threat, and the Ravens had no receivers. Obviously, that was the story for the longest time as well, and it's just never materialized. And if it's not materializing when Andrews goes out, it's not going to happen. We've done this 3 or 4 times now, where Andrews goes out and Isaiah Likely just does not do what you want him to do. But look. Again, tight end pickings are slim, so maybe he is your guy. I think maybe you've convinced me a little bit, Pat. Cade Otton might be the better bet. Might go Likely over Tanner Hudson, although, look, I have seen Tanner Hudson's name a lot more than I would like to have the past couple weeks. This guy will not go away. I also keep confusing him with Trenton Irwin when I turn Bengals games on.
I'll tell you what, last week I had an anytime touchdown on Trenton Irwin, and had I had the first touchdown, I probably wouldn't be on this podcast right now. I'd probably, would have gone off the grid if I had him as
Bora Bora.
First touchdown. But the anytime was still nice to me, so that was fun. That was fun. But in another one, this is an interesting injury. Kenneth Walker has an oblique injury. Pete Carroll said it's significant enough to the point where they're concerned about his status. And don't forget, he had that sports hernia injury before the season, obviously groin, oblique, similar area, similar kind of injury. So is this the third year in a row now where we could have a Seahawk running back be a league winner? Rashad Penny, and then last year Kenneth Walker supplants Rashad Penny, and now Zach Charbonnet will, in theory, replace Kenneth Walker. And we've talked about the two of them a lot in terms of their usage But the one thing that you can say about Kenneth Walker is he's been great. What do they call it? The 10 zone, within the 10-yard line. Mm-hmm. The guy scores a lot of touchdowns. And Zach Charbonnet, we've kind of seen him be a great pass catcher. So with these pass catching 2-minute drill kind of thing, with the early down work, with the goal line work, I mean, Zach Charbonnet is a must start if Kenneth Walker does miss time, which it seems like he's going to at least miss a week or two.
Okay, so you're calling him a must start as I have him on my bench at this very moment. Look, I like everything you're saying.
Obviously, it all depends on your league.
Of course, on your roster. No, of course.
He at least vaults into the conversation where it's like, he is a firm RB2, I think, going forward, without Kenneth Walker. And then it comes down to, if Kenneth Walker comes back, what's the split like then? Zach Charbonnet is not going to go away now, especially if he makes good on it. But as we talked about the last couple of weeks, they have a brutal upcoming running back schedule.
They do. But Pat, I will say this, now that you kind of talked through it a little bit, this could be a slight saving grace, not for Kenneth Walker owners, because obviously you have the guy and he's out, but for the fact that getting either one of these running backs to succeed in this absolutely brutal stretch they have coming up, which involves 2 games against the Niners, 1 against the Cowboys, and 1 against the Eagles, 3 incredibly good defenses. The one benefit could be one running back may get all the work now in this backfield, or at least the vast majority, because before it was like, okay, you have incredibly tough running back matchups and a split backfield with Kenneth Walker and Zach Charbonnet, because Charbonnet has been eating away at the snaps lately. Now, this past week, after Kenneth Walker went out, I mean, well, I don't have the stats for exactly after he went out, but the total game snaps, because Kenneth Walker went out pretty early, Zach Charbonnet played 85% of the snaps, and then DJ Dallas played 11. So, like, you know, you've got a situation where Zach Charbonnet may be virtually an every down back, and if you have that kind of volume, it may make up for whatever these tough matchups are.
I will say, though, Pete Carroll loves him two running backs. I think we're going to see some DJ Dallas, unfortunately. Not to the point.
I do too, but it just surprised me that we didn't see him more after Walker went out. I mean, it's not like he doesn't know who DJ Dallas is. Like, he's on the roster. He's active.
I think it's more so just that, like, I feel like kind of going into a game plan, it seems like Pete Carroll always wants there to be two guys rather than kind of mid-game shifting these things. He just said Charbonnet to have it all. So I'll let you in on this. I'm in a 16-team league. My team is 9-2. My team is very good. Kenneth Walker is my RB2. I had only one other running back on my roster, Darrell Henderson.
Well, that's trouble now.
Currently, I do not have an RB2. And here are the top available guys based on projections on ESPN. Patrick Taylor. We'll talk about the Green Bay situation. Jerick McKinnon, the aforementioned DJ Dallas, Chase Edmonds, Jamal Williams, and Elijah Mitchell.
Oh, my. That is desolate. That is bad.
Horrible, but the rest of my team is real nice, though. So,
I mean, I would hope so.
No, it's not. My RB1's Tony Pollard. What am I talking
about? Oh, dear.
So, like,
you need new running backs
Tony
altogether.
Pollard is my only. Do you think I could trade with anyone? This is like a +1 league. I don't have a +1 though. I'm one of the strays in this league. But you think I could just like swing a trade? Absolutely collude. Hang on.
If there was any type of league that you could, sell high on Tony Pollard after his one of two halfway decent games all season, this might be the type of league that you
Brett
could do
or Luke,
that,
if you're listening, mind your own business.
Yeah, that is a tough situation to be in with those running backs. But yeah, I mean, look, I do think DJ Dallas will be involved. This is coming from a guy. I've started DJ Dallas in the past. I'm not proud of it, but it's happened. A couple of years back, it got that bad because he was their starter for a couple of games. I don't remember why. I think Chris Carson, one of his various injury issues. Shout out to the boy.
You know what's crazy? That's already a name that you said that, and I was like, wow, Chris Carson. That sucks, man. He was solid. That sucks.
His name is like slideshow material at this point. Those TikTok slideshows that are like, oh, you forgot about this guy, and then you
five
didn't
NFL players you forgot about.
You didn't think Lou Oldeng would show up in this slideshow, but he did. So, yes, shout out to Chris Carson. He was very serviceable for a very long time.
Luke is listening.
Oh, dear.
He's in the chat. Oh, dear.
Your collusion's being called out.
No.
But look, as far as Zach Charbonnet is concerned, no, I don't think he'll be alone. He's not going to get like 90% of carries, or he's not going to get the Kyron Williams workload where it's like, hey, buddy, you have other running backs on the roster. But if he could get, 70% of carries, which is not something that he or Ken Walker have had since week 6 when Walker had 76%. Walker had 80% in week 7 as well. But they've basically been splitting. If he could get a decent workload, then maybe I'd feel a little more comfortable starting him against a team like the 49ers, at the very least in a flex role. I struggle right now to do that because, I'd have to be playing him over probably Nico Collins, and Nico feels like a good play most weeks, but look, maybe I do throw Charbonnet in there and then just let my boy Tank Dell and A.J. Brown hold down the wide receiver slot.
See, I have those two guys in my wide receiver slots in that league, but I also have terrible news. I own Kenneth Gainwell, so I can't read. So I do have another active running back. So
no, you don't, but
Kenneth Gainwell, set sail. Please score a touchdown.
You have too many running backs named Kenneth is what I've come away from with this. Anyway, we can move on from the Ken Walker injury. Look, if you've got Charbonnet, he's definitely startable, especially with just the lack of running backs that a lot of people likely have in most leagues because it has been tough out here this year. Pat, a running back we were banking for a lot from in his return, and we got the exact opposite of that. He pulled the Simpsons meme where you put the hat on the rack and then walk immediately back out of the bar.
Did you see someone made like an AI-generated thing of him doing that? Of him
I did. That's why I'm bringing it up. Yeah, it was the knee brace.
Wild.
That was well done because I saw it posted by the fantasy footballers. I don't know if they created it. I didn't know they had that kind of budget to do such a thing. But yeah, Kenneth Walker. Devon Achane in and then immediately out. Re-injured his same knee. It doesn't seem to be as serious. Doesn't seem like it's going to require surgery. But Mike McDaniel is being a bit coy on us with what his outlook is. He has not ruled him out for the ever elusive Friday night football that we're getting this week. I was very confused and forgot that was happening.
I put FNF in our show sheet to there.
Yeah. Five Nights at Freddy's fucking
Yeah,
head-ass
oh,
football
God.
game. Have you seen the movie yet? I haven't. I've just seen a million ads for it.
No.
No, I've not seen the movie. But yes, Devon Achane could still play Friday. We don't really know what to expect. It's definitely concerning, Pat, right? Like, it's the same knee. He's been out for 5 weeks. Initially, it didn't even seem like the Dolphins indicated that IR was not a necessity, that it was more of a precaution, that he could have maybe only missed like 3 weeks, but they decided to play it safe. And even with playing it safe, he ends up re-injuring himself almost immediately. It's a little bit hard of a situation to read. He could very well be just fine if he goes out and plays on Friday, but I think it's just a reminder that, look, he's not a very big guy. This is going to be a guy that maybe deals with these kind of things throughout his career just based on his stature, and you hope that he can at least hold up enough to be a role player in this backfield, even if, Raheem Mostert has to carry most of the load.
And I'm seeing like Savon Ahmed is like a popular name kind of on some of these waiver wire columns, because the waiver wire is gross, but I don't really see a ton of stock in Savon Ahmed or Jeff Wilson for that matter. I mean, it's clear that Ahmed...
Savon Ahmed just went on IR. Yeah, Savon Ahmed got put on IR today. So he is toast as well. Yeah.
Okay, so does Jeff Wilson exist now?
Yes, I've seen Jeff Wilson's name brought up a little bit in response to Savon Ahmed going on IR.
I think you have to now, because they do use a second running back, at least a noticeable amount, like more so than just kind of being a breather back. But Jeff Wilson has not been used at all by Mike McDaniel this year, who's like, Jeff Wilson's one of his darlings. So
yeah.
But again, if you're a Raheem Mostert owner, you're happy about this, I guess. Well, I guess you're not happy about the injury, but you're going to benefit from it. I own him, Raheem Mostert, in a couple leagues. I'm feeling good about his potential the next few weeks. But they haven't looked nearly as stout. I mean, I know the Raiders' defense is elite, but they did not run away with that game the way they probably should have.
Yeah, and this has been a concern with Dolphins teams, and I mean, I don't want to, overreact to what happened against the Raiders, but this was a concern coming into the year. People talk about the Dolphins, like the way they play lends to them being burnt out by the end of a long NFL season. Like, you have all these guys that rely on speed and explosiveness, and it's like when you get into the dog days of, December, like, are they going to be strong enough and have their bodies be held up enough to continue operating at that elite blazing speed that their offense's identity is built around? And I think it's a valid question. I mean, you're seeing Devon Achane, who we thought would be a key cog in this team, be on and off the field now constantly. We don't know how much we can rely on him. Tyreek Hill's going in and out of games. Granted, his was because of a hand injury this past week, so I'm not putting much stock in that, but like,
and Jalen Waddle, same thing. He's missed a game. He's been on and off the field. Who would have thought Raheem Mostert would be the most healthy guy in that starting offense?
It's true.
And Tua with a walking concussion, and Raheem Mostert. Knock on wood, please stay healthy, both of you. But
no, seriously. No, it is a very unlikely scenario that has played out here. I mean, I basically went like all flags up to get Raheem Mostert the fuck off my team because I was worried. I mean, yes, I knew, Devon Achane was going to maybe play a role or Jeff Wilson was coming back, but I was mostly worried about an eventual injury with him, and he has just been rock steady. I mean, missed some practices as far as maintenance, but like that's been the right move because he's been healthy for all the games. So, shout out to Raheem Mostert. Look, if you've had him, definitely less productive than his initial days in fantasy as the season has gone on, but still certainly a viable starter, which, he's been a crazy value in terms of where you likely got him in the draft. Pat, Aaron Jones, another injury we're watching, knee injury, not a torn ACL, and honestly, he could be good to go after this week, but it certainly sounds like he is going to miss this Thursday's game against the Detroit Lions. So, in terms of what to do about this, look, A.J. Dillon, if you're desperate, hats off to you. Go ahead and start him, but this Lions defense is not bad, and A.J. Dillon is not good. So, really, if you need a desperation starter, he'll touch the ball a lot. He's averaged, I believe it was 18 touches a game in games that Aaron Jones has missed, but that could just as easily turn into 18 touches for, 55 total yards, and nobody's going to be surprised if you want to go that direction. Sure.
He's been terribly inefficient, and it's really touchdown dependent. Another Connecticut guy, New London, Connecticut. I know someone who knows someone who had their DM slid into by A.J. Dillon. She fumbled.
Scandalous.
She fumbled the bag. Hopefully he doesn't fumble the football, but... Yeah, he's just shown to be only really kind of useful is in more of a tandem, situation. Like he's like almost like Alexander Madison. You'd think like he's not, in theory it's like, oh great, AJ Dillon finally gets his chance, but
AJ Dillon is thick Tony Pollard.
Yeah, I don't. I'm not in love with AJ Dillon this week or at any point this year. But again, but also Aaron Jones hasn't been spectacular, so it's not a huge blow to it. But again, it does open up kind of a new backfield situation. Another situation that we could be going back to though is Cooper Kupp, what their Rams are calling a low-grade ankle sprain. It seemed like he really wanted to get back in the game. He was on that sideline for like almost 2 quarters, trying to work it out, and it just didn't happen. We've seen the Rams without Cooper Kupp this year, and we've seen just Puka Nacua absolutely eat, which he finally started doing in the second half after not being targeted for a whole quarter. For Puka to put up the stat line he did was remarkable. But I think the bigger thing is that Tutu Atwell really started strong at the beginning of the year, and he had a pretty nice game, at least in terms of targets, this time.
Yeah, Tutu Atwell definitely becomes a viable play again if Cooper Kupp were to miss any time. I mean, he was kind of the unsung, rising star of this Rams receiver core because everybody was so blown away by who the fuck is Puka Nacua and why is he a top 3 receiver in all of fantasy football. Meanwhile, Tutu Atwell is just putting up like low-end wide receiver 1 numbers on his own. So I think that's definitely back in play if Cooper Kupp were to miss some time. Doesn't seem overly serious though. Cooper Kupp maybe only misses a week if that, but just keep an eye on that injury. And if you are receiver needy or flex needy, Tutu Atwell certainly becomes an option.
Now, here's my question. So, hypothetical situation, not real at all. You're starting to flex. You've got to start either Isaiah Pacheco or Puka Nacua. Hypothetical strictly. Gus Edwards is also in the equation, hypothetically speaking.
Sure, yep.
So,
no team specific here. Yep.
It's just so hard because we are a non-PPR league. I feel like in a PPR league, you'd have to start Puka in that situation.
Yeah.
But in a non-PPR league, obviously, the volume leads to production for receivers more so than running backs. And Pacheco had a pretty nice game, but no passing upside and not a lot of touchdown upside. So that's the thing. So that's going to be one that I'm going to be chewing on for the rest of the week. And we'll talk about Gus Edwards very shortly, but frustrating.
Yeah, no, tough decision, but look, good problems to have. At least you're not trying to scrape for somebody random for your flex spot.
That'll be the tight end spot. Thank you.
That's true. You got very viable options for your flex spot. Some other Rams news here. Look, Kyren Williams is also expected to return. Slot him right back in your lineup. Look, what Pat mentioned earlier about Darrell Henderson. If you guys didn't know, the reason we were joking about him owning him is because Darrell Henderson got waived today due to Kyren Williams being expected to be back this week. And now that it's only, Kyren Williams and Royce Freeman on this team, Kyron's the guy. Like I don't expect this to be, they found some revelation in Royce Freeman and now he's going to take some of the carries. Like he may take some carries to spell Kyron because Kyron was getting an ungodly workload before he got hurt. But I do think Kyron is absolutely like, you don't need to wait and see with Kyron, in my opinion. You just put him right back in your lineup.
Yeah, I don't think he's going to jump straight to that like 20-plus carries thing just because he's coming off an injury. But it's clear that Sean McVay trusts him with that. So obviously I think maybe give it a week, maybe 2, and then Kyron will be right there back getting this kind of crazy volume. And the Rams did, at least in the first half of that game, they looked awful, miserable.
Yeah.
Second half, they kind of turned it on a little bit. That was kind of a game of 2 halves for both teams. I watched an inordinate amount of that game. There was only 3 games in the 4:00 window on Red Zone. I just watched too much of that Seattle Los Angeles game, but yeah, you've got to start Kyron if you've got him, and then see where that goes.
Yeah, I think Kyron is going to be a valuable asset down the stretch. And again, I'm not thrilled about the person I'm playing in fantasy this week is getting Kyron back. So, look, maybe we do limit the workload here a little bit, Rams. Maybe he's not quite right just yet. Let's ease him in. Let's give him like 25% of snap. But no, in my objective opinion, he's probably going to get a ton of work and be pretty good again. Pat, we'll take that and transition right into our other backfields with our backfield boogaloo, our updates on various backfields that are, either messy or just worth talking about for one reason or another. And we'll lead it off with this. Tony Pollard is dust. I don't care. He had a solid game here against the Panthers, especially, fantasy-wise at least, finding the end zone. But
he just got the touchdown.
He needed 4 quarters against the Carolina Panthers to score his first touchdown since week 1. I don't know how you expect anything more than like mid-tier to back-end RB2 numbers from this guy. That's what he is. In PPR leagues, he's RB18 on the year. There's no reason to expect things to get better. He's had the easiest matchups he will have all year, and he has not really produced in them. I mean, he's been good enough in this game against the Panthers, and he was really good in that week 1 game against the Giants, but that was a fucking eternity ago, so it doesn't really matter at this point. He is just not... He's not the guy you drafted when you picked him with either a late first or a early or late second round pick. I know his ADP was kind of all over the place depending on around when you drafted and what format, but he was no worse than a second round pick, and he is not producing that way in the slightest. And I think, Pat, you saw me make this move a week or two ago, and unfortunately he got hurt as well and has been DNP the last 2 days. But Rico Dowdle, I think, was a worthwhile dart throw because of how bad Tony Pollard has been. They could work Rico in more as the season goes on, and I think that you could do a lot worse for an end of your bench stash than Rico Dowdle. So I am upset. I think last week could have been a bit of a Rico Dowdle breakout game if he wasn't, nursing that injury. Instead, he ended up with, I think, 8 carries for 23 yards, so it wasn't anything spectacular. No. I'm assuming the ankle is why he was so inefficient, because otherwise he's looked pretty good this year. But yeah, Rico Dowdle, I think, still an okay dart throw as far as end of your bench goes, because Tony Pollard's just not the guy, and it's unfortunate to see.
Yeah,
it doesn't seem like that explosiveness is there. Yeah, he's just not the same guy we saw. Maybe an extra year, or at least an extra off season of recovery post surgery will get him a little bit back to the explosiveness that we once saw from him. But as of right now, you can't really rely on the guy. Pat, another backfield here. Obviously, this is the one we've kind of just been monitoring all year. It's the Lions backfield. Touch on it really quick. Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery. Obviously, both extremely startable players still. They both had another week where they both produced. Both are getting red zone carries. The one thing I noted to you before we started up our recording was that the main difference from early in the season is that David Montgomery is just not getting that massive bulk volume of carries, but he hasn't needed it so far. Back-to-back weeks now off the injury, he's had 12 carries and 12 carries. So I'm assuming, and maybe this is jumping to conclusions, but second week off the injury, I feel like this is what we can expect most weeks from him. Yeah. Maybe a few more, but I don't see it getting back to really early in the season where Montgomery's getting 31 carries in a game. It's just Jahmyr Gibbs is too good, so he probably becomes a little more touchdown dependent, but it's as bankable of a touchdown dependent guy as you can get. We all remember Jamal Williams last year.
Yeah, and we know that. Granted, Gibbs is still getting carries near the goal line, but Montgomery's also scoring. No, this week was from the one, but obviously he had the 75-yard touchdown run last week. But the way I see it as a David Montgomery owner, I'm going to start him until the dud happens, and then I'll reconsider it. Because both weeks I've been like, oh, this isn't good for David Montgomery, but then he ends up with 15 points. Mm-hmm. So then it's like, you've got to roll with it. Like I said, my Pacheco, Puka, Gus Edwards, that is with David Montgomery firmly entrenched is my RB2. That's not up for much of a debate with me this week, but Jahmyr Gibbs has been phenomenal. He has been everything everyone thought he did. He just kind of needed the time to get unleashed. Maybe Dan Campbell kind of easing him in. It worked. He was ready to go. Good timing for the Montgomery injury to happen. I believe in the last few weeks he's been a top 5 running back in PPR the last 4 weeks, which is remarkable. And the goal line carries are just icing on the cake there. You don't even really need that. He'd be productive without the touchdown opportunity. So Jahmyr Gibbs to the moon, and I think you're still starting David Montgomery until he really lays an egg for you.
Yeah, I think Montgomery's ceiling is just a little bit more capped. And look, he is going to be a touchdown-dependent player, but those touchdowns
have 3 touchdowns in a game like he did early in the year, though.
He could. I think that's less likely now if they're going to give Gibbs any sort of goal line touches. If Montgomery were to get 3, it would be purely by chance and probably because the Lions as a team rushed for 5 in the game. But it's possible. And look, if you're wondering how both these guys have been sustained, as a Sam Laporta owner, I can tell you where the production has come from, and it has been to the detriment of my pal Sam Laporta. Yeah. Ever since both these guys have been active, Laporta has been very much an afterthought in terms of their scheme and their offensive game plan. So look, maybe better days will be ahead for him, but I would bank definitely more on the running backs to continue their production as long as both are healthy. So keep starting them both. Understand that Gibbs probably the better play than Montgomery from this point going forward, but still both startable for sure. Next up, we got the Ravens, Pat. So this has been a very contentious one because people are basically begging for Keaton Mitchell to get the keys to this backfield, and the Ravens keep saying no. However, it does seem like he may have jumped Justice Hill on Thursday to also played one less snap than Gus Edwards, but Gus Edwards is the guy still on the goal line, as you noted from him scoring 2 touchdowns on your bench. This is a backfield that is kind of like a diet version of the Lions. If we can get Justice Hill out of the equation, look, you've got the explosive guy in Keaton Mitchell, and then you've got the just plotting more goal line guy in Gus Edwards. But it's hard because you definitely don't trust both these guys the way you trust the Lions right now. It feels like with Lamar Jackson being the quarterback, there is just not enough to go around for both guys to be productive every week. Gus Edwards feels like the smarter play week to week, whereas Keaton Mitchell is just kind of you hold on to him, you see if he gets more and more integrated, and you can desperation flex him if you really need, but that's really all he is at this point. I don't know if Keaton's going to get that every down workload.
I'm not ready to start Keaton Mitchell. I don't know if I ever will be. And Gus Edwards is a guy who's been in the system for a while now. They know what you get from him. But he still also, you always see the graphic. It's like guys that average over 5 yards a carry on career. And Gus Edwards is one of them. Like the guy is somehow efficient, but also just such a bruiser in short yardage situations, particularly the goal line. And like we said with Detroit, they're at the goal line an awful lot. And I remember saying to Bran, I think I said that like if he's like when he scored one, I'm like he's gonna go for 3 and I'm gonna jump off a bridge. And they got another one and I said 1 away. I was like 1 away. And but yeah, I think Gus is I believe they have they're playing Los Angeles. They're playing the Chargers. That's a very good matchup. Where there's probably going to be a lot of points in that game and a lot of situations. So that's where that whole Puka, Pacheco, Gus thing kind of becomes a little more difficult for me, is that Gus has such a good matchup. But again, I think this is kind of similarly like to almost like the Lions at the beginning of the year. I think you got to hold the line and keep doing what we've been doing, starting Gus Edwards and not starting Keaton Mitchell until we've been shown otherwise. And obviously the snaps were there for Mitchell, but Gus is getting the far more valuable touches right now.
Yeah, look, we all
and doing more
Keaton
and
Mitchell
putting in
happen,
production
but
with him. It's not like he's having like the Jerome Bettis like 3 carries for -1 yards and 2 touchdowns. Like he's not doing that. So like he's touchdown dependent. But say he doesn't score a touchdown, he won't have he can still get you 5-6 points, which is not great, but still.
Yeah, we all want Keaton Mitchell to happen, but you can't make it happen just by keeping him in your lineup. So I think hold the line and keep him on your bench, keep Gus Edwards in your lineup if you have a spot for him, and just wait until anything changes. Because the 8 carries for 33 yards for Keaton Mitchell, look, it's more than the 3 carries he had against the Browns, but it's still not enough to sustain you unless he breaks one for 50+ yards, and that is just not a bankable way to play fantasy. So no, I would keep Keaton Mitchell on the bench for now as just kind of a high upside stash. And honestly, if he doesn't show anything in the next 2 weeks, then he probably becomes droppable, because I don't know that there's going to be a massive step forward taken after that, and you just can't keep wasting time with guys that are going to clog your bench, and you have no reason to believe
they always say
change.
If there's not a guy that you think you have a realistic chance at starting this year, shouldn't keep him on your bench. You keep a couple spots open for those guys, and Keaton Mitchell's like that. I think I only own him in 1 league, and I started Jonnu Smith in my flex over him like 2 weeks ago. That's how desperate, and I won. That's how that's how desperate I was, that I was basically using all of my healthy non-bye players, and I still did not start Keaton Mitchell.
Jonnu Smith over Keaton Mitchell. You heard it here first, folks. That is about as much of a Keaton Mitchell, what's the word, indictment as you could really get.
It's not like the sign of approval, but the opposite. Yep.
Yeah, all right. We'll move on to the Bears here. Khalil Herbert got 16 carries, didn't do much with it.
Yuck, 35 yards. Yuck.
Deonta Foreman he was hurt, Pat. I honestly was very confused about this backfield. Okay, suffered a right ankle injury during Sunday's game and is questionable to return. That makes sense. Yeah, this backfield's icky, but Khalil Herbert still the guy you're going to start if you're going to start anybody, I think. But I don't know that you're going to be able to rely on anyone going forward. I think you may have been right last week, Pat, where Deonta Foreman kind of proved himself enough to stay involved in this backfield. And if that's the case, I don't know how you start anybody for fantasy purposes. It's disgusting.
I think Foreman has a bit more upside than Khalil Herbert. Obviously, he's done well in terms of getting touchdowns at the goal line, as well as just I think we've just seen it in Deonta Foreman the last 3 years on 3 different teams. The guy's just not bad. I don't think you ever want this guy as your starter, but he's a great, we've seen it 3 years in a row now. He's a good backup, but I'm hanging on to Foreman in leagues I have him, but it is ugly. It is ugly, and I want nothing to do with it. Even Roschon Johnson, who looked good, 6 carries, 30 yards. But how about Justin Fields? 18 carries, 104 yards. Like, that is what you wanted when you drafted Justin Fields this year, and why everyone thought he was kind of going to make that Jalen Hurts-esque jump. We finally saw that. Well, a fantastic fantasy day with that, those 10 extra points. A touchdown would have been even better, but on top of what he did. But I don't want anything to do with his backfield. And this may be the last week that we have them in our backfield boogaloo, because they just may not be worth it.
Yeah, they may not be. The backfield boogaloo kind of requires at least one of the players to be fantasy relevant. And again, look, if anybody's going to be, it's going to be Khalil Herbert. 16 carries compared to Roshan Johnson's 6 and Deonta Foreman's 6. But it is gross and concerning that both of them had the same amount of carries as backups. And then Deonta Foreman ended up getting the touchdown. The one maybe nice thing about this... exactly. The one upside here is that Khalil Herbert did have 3 targets and managed 2 catches on them. I mean, it was for only 6 yards. But if anything, look, I would be more concerned if we saw like Roshan Johnson getting those targets or something to that effect. Maybe Khalil Herbert. We know Khalil Herbert's the best back in this backfield. It's just a matter of how much that translates to volume and how much he can stave off, the touchdown vulture that Deonta Foreman likely will be. But as long as Deonta Foreman's involved, you can't confidently start really anybody in this Bears backfield because Justin Fields has taken enough for himself, and then if you can't consolidate it to one other guy, it's just that there's not enough pie to go around for everybody. Pat, I love this segment that you threw in here.
Yeah.
Fantasy football players that we are thankful for. Folks, Thanksgiving is a mere 2 days away. And so I know we all have those players out there that we are just extra thankful for, whether they've just been rock solid for us or have been great pickups off the waiver wire. Pat, why don't you kick us off? What players are you most thankful for this holiday season?
The guy I am most thankful for is Brandon Ayuk. We talk about our main league. I own Brandon Ayuk in every other league. In all my other 4 leagues, I own Brandon Ayuk. And I don't know why I didn't make him my Pat's pal. That is, looking back on that, very disappointed. But he has just been so rock solid. Going into the year, people kind of said that, like, this is going to be him kind of, cementing himself as the best wide receiver in that offense. And he has. I mean, granted, it's taken Debo being off the field. But the guy has just been so solid. You're going to get the involvement. And he's just real life. He's just a great football player. One of the better blockers. Because you just have to be a good blocker in that offense or you're not allowed to play there. So, but, my records are good in a lot of leagues. And Brandon Ayuk is the consistent. So thank you, Brandon Ayuk. You go one. We'll go back and forth.
All right, yeah. My first player that I'm thankful for, I'll go with the obvious one. It's A.J. Brown. Look, I basically resigned myself.
What about last night?
Yeah, okay. Last night was pretty bad. That's the thing, though. Last night was his first dud all year, basically.
Yeah,
I think week 1, I don't think he was great, but overall, he has been everything I've wanted. Everything I've wanted and more. And with all the other receivers I was considering, throughout our mock drafting and draft prep, I knew what draft pick I had about a month or 2 before our actual draft happened. And every time I was like, I'm going to take A.J. Brown. He feels like the safest guy. Like he's tied to an elite quarterback. He had a good year last year. Like I don't need a guy who has that absolutely insane upside. Like when you looked at maybe Garrett Wilson in that spot, what was he going to do with Aaron Rodgers, right? Mm-hmm. A.J. Brown was a guy that I was just like, I'm going to get at least very good production from. And, maybe I fall into one of those guys just have kind of better years than others sometimes, and that's what A.J. Brown's having. Like we knew he was a great player. He just happens to be having a career year, and I think those are the kind of players that you should be targeting in your drafts. It's like sometimes don't overthink it, don't chase the upside. A.J. Brown is a firm testament to my new pivot this year. After last year, targeting all the upside and getting fucked by basically all of it, A.J. Brown, I was like, you're going to at least be solid for me. And he has been more than solid, been one of the best top 5 receivers in fantasy football, top 3. And just thank you, A.J. Brown, for holding it down basically every week except this one. But I'll forgive you because I already clinched the playoffs by this point, largely on your back.
Yeah, I'm going to cheat here, and I'm going to do a tandem here. I am thankful for David Montgomery and Puka Nacua, because we have talked about in our league that I did, for the first time in my life, I went 0 RB to a laughable point. Like, I was drafting Tank Bigsby, I was drafting Elijah Mitchell. It was ugly. But the reason why it's worked so well is that David Montgomery has been as good as he has, and that I just so happen to have the number 1 waiver claim and claimed Puka, which made Devontae Smith expendable, which netted me Jonathan Taylor, which essentially nullified my 0 RB. But that could have failed miserably. Like everything fell into place. And it's just the fact that Puka, granted, he's kind of faded a little bit. Had a nice week this past week, but Matthew Stafford's back, so you got to expect it. But for him to just take the fantasy world by storm, and to be for real, we've seen it. Oh, God, who was the Cowboys guy? Terrence Williams? Who was the guy that you drafted in the random...
It may have been him. Terrence was it Terrence?
No, there was a guy in the Cowboys. Oh my God,
Kevin Ogletree?
Kevin Ogletree.
Yeah.
Kevin Ogletree, thank you. Like, we've had Kevin Ogletrees in the past who have, like, had flaming hot starts and then are gone. Kenny Britt is another good one, for example. But Puka has staying power. Like, he is going to be really good for that team for a really long time. And I'm sure a lot of fantasy teams are grateful. So kind of giving it for the people. For the people who had the most fab money or the best waiver claim or whatever you did, Puka Nacua has made you very happy. He has made me very happy. Gary, if you're listening, suck it.
Yeah, Gary very upset that Pat is benefiting off Puka Nacua because Gary popped in our chat before the season, I believe.
Yes, like
mentioning
very close.
mentioning Puka Nacua just in passing, and Pat was like, "Who the fuck is that?" And then Pat.
No, he said, "What do you guys think of Puka Nacua?" And then I typed in the chat, I said, "What do you think about these nuts?" And people were like, "Whoa, Pat!" And I'm like, "Wait, we know him." I'm like, "We know him."
We're not just being mean to some random viewer.
People think I'm just going after random listeners. So no, but. I gotta eat my words there. I didn't really, because how often do guys like that come on that quickly?
Yeah,
it's just
totally
very
fair.
rare that it's happened, and he's stuck. So the people that were on Puka before the year, Gary, you were right. I was wrong. That's fine. I'm enjoying being wrong.
Yeah, Pat. So since you kind of extended your pick, I will extend mine a little bit because I've got Tank Dell on here. I'm going to extend it to basically the Houston Texans because. Yeah. I don't know where my fantasy team would be if I did not have any or all of these Texans on it, because I am now week to week starting 3 of them, and maybe that's egregious, but find me a good reason to bench any of them. CJ Stroud, Nico Collins, and Tank Dell. Tank Dell is the one I originally had wrote down by himself because I think he's been kind of the biggest difference maker I've had. He's performing like a wide receiver 1 the past several weeks with no signs of it slowing down. All the targets are funneling through him with kind of, Nico Collins and Dalton Schultz and others, going with whatever's left. But Tank Dell has become the engine of the passing game on this team, and it's a passing game that has been incredibly productive because of CJ Stroud. I don't know where my team would be if I did not claim Tank Dell, if I did not claim CJ Stroud. I've been a waiver warrior, and it's largely been the Houston Texans, because otherwise I'd be sitting here with still Justin Fields, who obviously was out for 4 weeks, so I would have had to figure that out without CJ Stroud around. Without Tank Dell, my flex spot would be in flux because it would just be A.J. Brown and then Nico Collins, and I'm just glad I drafted Nico Collins because he was a guy I was excited about basically the whole pre-draft process. So, look, the Texans have been a much, obviously, more conducive fantasy hotbed than I think anybody could have possibly predicted. And for them to be basically single-handedly propping up my fantasy team as the season goes on and propelling me to this 9-2 record, I'm just very, very happy I fell into them. And they have also been a product of me intentionally this year being more liberal with my waiver claims, because in the past I found myself holding on to it and being like, all right, I want to wait until my waiver claim is super high up, and then you get, whatever running back becomes a starter due to injury or whatever else may happen. And I was like, look, that like hardly ever happens. Like, let's just claim the guys who we think are good players, even if you don't see an immediate spot for them in your lineup or you don't know where they would fit into your team. If you think they're a good player who is going to be productive and have some level of value the rest of the year, claim them and see where it goes. That was the mindset with both CJ and Tank, and it's gotten me here, and it could get me to a championship if all breaks right. So shout out to the Houston Texans. They have been the motor of my squad.
And shout out for the Houston Texans for not bending me over and forcing Brandon to wear this wig. But I am a big Tank Dell owner in a dynasty league, too. I'm just feeling myself in that one. And I own Nico Collins in all 4 of my other leagues as well. I drafted him in 3, traded for him in another. So grateful for them for that. Grateful for them for not just, destroying me this past week.
Yeah, Tank Dell had a very good game, but CJ and Nico Collins a little bit more of a tame output. Still not bad outputs. I mean, CJ was up over 15, and Nico was around like 6 or 7 or 8 or something like that in non-PPR, of course. I'm still counting on them carrying me pretty well the rest of the way. But those are the players we are thankful for. Folks, if you have any of us, if you have either of us on social media or, Instagram, Twitter, tell us what players you're thankful for. And obviously, if you're watching YouTube live right now, tell us what players you're thankful for. And there, we got a couple people telling us. One is thankful for Big Cock Brock, that being Brock Purdy, holding down his quarterback spot. Got Dante talking about Devin Singletary. I don't know if that's just a response to my Texans, but it seems like I don't think you'd type all caps Singletary unless you were a Devin Singletary owner. He's been a monster lately. Very thankful for Sam Laporta, says Nicholas Smith. And then we got Nate, who also drafted 0 RB, says he's thankful for Deonta Foreman. Bergs is thankful for St. Brown. Yeah, just get that thankfulness out there. It is that time of year.
We got Gandhi throwing one out for Travis Etienne a little higher up in there.
Yep. Yeah, Travis Etienne, God, what a...
Tua
Etienne
not
is
getting
basically-
brain damage. That's Jackson there.
Yes, Tua staying healthy has been a blessing for anybody with Tua on their team.
One of Pat's
All right,
pals.
Pat, we will
Pat's
move...
best pal.
Yes, very true. Oh, Dustin Hopkins, good kicker, thankful one there.
Yeah,
Thank you for a
kickers.
kicker. Hopkins
Brandon
has been a
Aubrey, let's
monster.
go.
All right, we'll move on to our pickups of the week. We basically touched on most of these guys, so we'll run through some of them. But Zach Charbonnet, for obvious reasons, is probably the top pickup of the week. Could be an RB1 for several weeks, depending on the severity of Kenneth Walker's injury. Regardless of the tough matchups, still a guy that you should prioritize on waivers if you can. Isaiah Likely, Josh Downs. Pat, do you want to touch on Josh Downs here a little bit? I know he's
How
your
is
boy.
Josh Downs available in 47% of leagues? Like, I understand he was on bye and guys drop him for roster crunch reasons, but so last week he was kind of playing banged up. He did not have and this was the Germany game, two catches, 40 yards, and then he had 1 for 10 in the game that he got hurt. But before that, seven catches, 9 targets, 72 yards. Game before, 5 for 6, 125 and a touchdown. Touchdown the game before that. Obviously, Michael Pittman's been very good, but Gardner Minshew has a great rapport with Josh Downs as well. I honestly think not only is he a guy that should not be on the waiver wire, he's a guy that should be in consideration for your lineup. So I was really surprised to find out today that he is available in that many, at least I believe it was NFL.com leagues. He was available in that many.
Still, yeah, available in 56% of ESPN leagues. So
That is bonkers. That is bonkers to me.
yeah, I think
he
it's
has
just
come on really
it's product
strong.
of recency bias. It's
And he
you
had
know
the
when
bye
you get a
week. Well,
guy who
that's
has
the thing,
bad
yeah,
games.
Two less than stellar games, and he's coming on the bye week, but he's coming off the bye week. He should be healthy. He had that knee injury that he didn't end up missing any games for, and now he's healthy, and he's been playing really well.
Yeah, when you have a guy like that who, stacks up bad games and then has a bye, he's going to get dropped, and you can take advantage of that if he is available in your league. Then we've got Tutu Atwell we touched on if Cooper Kupp were to miss time. Jaden Reed has been consistently getting more and more work with the Packers, although he was limited in practice today, I believe, so I have to keep an eye on that one. And then, Pat, the other big one, this was a guy I actually started this week, but another running back, if he's available in your league, Ty Chandler. So Alexander Mattison, and this will hurt me to say, actually played pretty well in the Vikings game this past week. He's played pretty well. He looked a little better. But Ty Chandler, even despite that, still outproduced him in terms of efficiency. So Chandler had 10 carries for 73 yards and 4 catches for 37 yards. Granted, some of this is juiced by a fake punt that Ty Chandler was the recipient of, so I will acknowledge that. But still, Ty Chandler is looking very good.
If Luke's still here in the chat, he can acknowledge that I was watching that live, talking to him, and I was like, no. What? So
yeah, Ty Chandler tried to put Pat in the grave on a fake punt.
I was getting kind of scared from Ty Chandler, but yeah, if you have, obviously you have Ty Chandler, but say you own both of these guys and you have to start one, who are you starting? I'm very conflicted.
If I have both. I think I'm starting Ty Chandler. I do.
I think so too, just because obviously he had that one special teams touch, but he still had a good amount of touches.
He just looks better. That's all it comes down to me. And I think it's going to continue to emerge over the next couple of weeks. That I don't know that he's going to take over the starting job, but I think this is going to become more and more of a split as time goes on. Because look, Kevin O'Connell's not a stupid guy. I think he knows, and the more he sees Ty Chandler just putting up numbers out there, I think the more he's going to put him out there.
Well, and here's another thing. At the beginning of the year, Ty Chandler was kind of talked about as this change of pace guy. Yeah, he had 4 catches for 37 yards. He's got a lot more pass catching upside than Alexander Mattison. So I think I'm going to agree with you there. And just the fact that he's still got 9 touches on offense, and obviously, or no, I'm sorry, not 9, 13 touches on offense plus the special teams carry. That's significant. That's pretty significant. And all it takes is for Mattison to kind of have another clunker, and for Chandler to have a good game, and you never know what's going to happen, but Ty Chandler needs to be owned.
Yeah, and Mattison losing another fumble, by the way, in this game, so something to monitor, because that has been an issue this year. Just
that's only
ball
for James
security.
Cook.
Yeah, ball security issue and general efficiency issues with Alexander Mattison, although 18 for 81, that's basically Adrian Peterson's 296-yard game for Alexander Mattison. But, we'll see how this backfield plays out. Ty Chandler would be my preferred option, though. So if he is still available in your league, with the Vikings offense continuing to look better than we expected it would, definitely a guy to watch. We will finish things out with our viewer questions.
We just got a letter. We just got a letter. We just got a letter. Wonder who it's from.
And some good questions here as we look ahead to the fantasy playoffs. So this first one, defense/special teams and kickers to pick up for the playoffs. This question coming from David Lambo. The playoffs that we will be considering for this question will be weeks 14 to 17 because, I mean, look, a lot of leagues will differ, but at the very least, these weeks will be included in your playoffs even if they don't encompass the entire thing. I think these are the optimal weeks to play your playoffs, but, to each their own. Pat, I'm mostly going to focus on defenses here because, look, guys, kickers, here's what I'll say for kickers, and I'll give you guys the secret sauce to what I've been doing with kickers all year. Go to fantasylife.com, and this is not an ad. Go to rankings, go to kickers, and sort by, there's a name in there in the rankings, Linda. I have followed her on Twitter for a while for her kicker rankings. She is spot on. She digs into kickers more than really anybody else you will find. So I'm at the point now where I kind of just blindly trust her rankings. She had Jason Myers as her number one kicker this past week. He promptly dropped 15. He dropped 14 and would have had 20 if he made that game-winning 50 whatever yarder that it was. So I trust her implicitly. I think you guys should do the same. So fantasylife.com, rankings, kickers, and just go week to week. Stream kickers. Yeah. There shouldn't be a kicker that you're like, let me leave him in for the whole playoffs.
Or just be me and get really lucky and draft Brandon Aubrey and Jason Myers and Brandon McManus in all my leagues. I have not had much turnover, but yeah, because there is a science to it. There is some matchup, teams got to be in position to score but not score, and teams that don't go for it. Like, there is a bit of a science to it. Like, Brandon Aubrey has just been phenomenal. Harrison Butker has just been phenomenal. So, like, sometimes you get lucky, other times you got to play the game. But in an ideal world, kickers don't exist in fantasy football. But it's still 2023. We're still here.
That's fair. Kickers do exist, though. Yeah, and there's so many things to consider. Like, look, Jason Myers, and the reason I just blindly trusted the ranking as well was because I looked at the matchup and I was like, yeah, Seahawks-Rams, like, first of all, I know Pete Carroll's not an excessively aggressive coach. Like, I don't love rostering Jason Sanders because I know Mike McDaniel's probably going to fucking go for it every time he's close. But Pete Carroll's not going to be overly aggressive. That's going to be a game that you can win with field goals because the Rams aren't going to run him out of the building. Like, I'm not starting Jason Myers this week because he's facing the 49ers, and there's going to come a time, most likely in that game, where the Seahawks can't settle for field goals anymore. So I'm not going to go with a Seahawks kicker. I want a guy who's going to be able to kick field goals all game. Guys, these are the kinds of things that Linda considers, and honestly probably the other rankers on there as well. But those are the rankings I found to be the best. Go week to week with your kickers. Don't try to find some magic kicker pill to lead you through the rest of the season. Just go week to week, and you'll be better off. But as far as defenses go, obviously these are a little bit not easier, but there's maybe a more reliable formula to predict which ones are going to be good. And it's you just basically target what the bad offenses are that these defenses are playing. So I wrote down 6 defenses here, some more likely to be available than others, but based on, sorry, my camera went out, but my mic is still here. I'm not even going to bother with it since the podcast is almost over, but
solidarity,
solidarity. I love it. I'm not going to, pretend like the Saints are going to be available in most leagues, but they do have probably the softest playoff schedule here with the Panthers, the Giants, the Rams, and then the Bucks just in total. And, their unit is very strong as well. So if you have them, you can rock them probably the rest of the year. But Pat, some of these other teams I wrote down, the Chargers, I think have a pretty solid group of matchups here. They get the Broncos, the Raiders, and then the Bills. You probably won't start them there, even though Josh Allen has been a turnover machine. So maybe you can. Then they got the Broncos
out of the realm of possibilities.
Yeah. So, Broncos twice, Raiders and Bills. Then you've got, the Houston Texans, Pat. I've had to talk myself out of planning to have them as my defense in the fantasy playoffs because I'm like, I cannot start 4 Texans out of my 9 spots in my roster. But their matchups do, make me kind of want to. They've got the Jets, the Titans, the Browns, and then the Titans from weeks 14 to 17. I mean, find me an offense in there that you're scared of because there is not one. Yeah. Then we've got the Green Bay Packers who go Giants, Bucks, Panthers, Vikings. Solid matchups there. The Lions get to go Bears, Broncos, and then Vikings, Cowboys. So, look, the Cowboys is probably the only one that you definitely won't start them against. But those first 3, you certainly could. And then the Miami Dolphins, this is strictly for probably your semifinal matchup or first 2 matchups of the fantasy playoffs because they get the Titans and the Jets, but then they get the Cowboys and the Ravens. I just included them because they're likely available in a lot of leagues, and you could at least get 2 weeks of usage out of them. But that's how you go with defenses, man. You just target the bad offenses.
And the thing I'll say too, do not be afraid to look ahead. If you if you have an empty bench spot, go look at the defense matchups next week. That's what I did this past week with the Commanders. I held the Commanders on my bench. They had a nice game against the Giants. 9 sacks. Thank you very much. But don't obviously if you are airtight on your bench and you can't do it, don't do it. But you don't have to drop your defense if they don't have a bad matchup. Like I've rostered the Saints defense all season in one league, but I've probably played them half the time, just because that could be the difference between a win and a loss, which is why I don't love defenses and kickers. But at the end of the day, it does matter. And a defense that you can start and help you win a game next week is probably more likely to win you a game than some random guy you take a flyer on that you're going to drop immediately after the next games.
Yeah, definitely. And it's got me looking ahead to defenses as well because, look, I've been starting the Ravens basically all season, and they do start the fantasy playoffs against the Rams, but then their schedule gets, not the easiest. They don't become automatic, like leave them in your lineup type of matchups. The fantasy playoffs, week 14 through 17, the Ravens would go Rams and then at the Jaguars, at the Niners, and then versus the Dolphins. So it's like that's 3 games that I don't feel great about. So I am, actively hunting through these defenses as well, seeing which ones I may want to go with for the latter half of the fantasy playoffs. Should I be lucky enough to get there, of course. I'm going to let them ride against the against the Rams at home, I think. I think that's pretty no-brainer given how good the Ravens have been. But some of these other games, less obvious. And then our final question, Pat. Trade deadline. In search of a reliable running back, who should I make a push for? So some trade deadlines haven't passed yet. This feels a little late for my blood, but I know this is how a lot of leagues are set up. So if your trade deadline hasn't passed and you are looking for a reliable running back, I got some options here who I think are somewhat buy lows, but have just like massive upside. Depends on your league whether these guys are going to be held onto like they're gold or if their owners might be a little willing to part with them. The names are Breece Hall, Jonathan Taylor, Austin Eckler, and Bijan Robinson. All 4 of these guys have very favorable fantasy playoff schedule. All 4 have at least good to great control of their backfields. I think Bijan probably has the lead because Arthur Smith is a weirdo, but it seems like they might be unleashing him a little bit more as the season goes on. Austin Eckler has 2 matchups against the Broncos, and all of these guys are coming off of not the games. So I think if there was any to bet low on somebody who could really backpack you through the playoffs potentially, it would be now, and it would be any of those guys if that's the kind of move you are trying to make.
Yeah, if you're in a position where you've clinched a playoff spot, go get someone specifically for the playoffs, like we talked about with defenses, because that could be the big difference. And, we haven't really seen Jonathan Taylor be unleashed. And, Breece Hall, you could maybe buy relatively low on him as just the Jets' offense has been as bad as it's been, especially outside of him. And then I think, we saw Bijan get a lot of work, and now coming out of the bye, maybe Arthur Smith will lean on him. Maybe we'll be talking about Arthur Smith in a far negative light next week. So, but yeah, agreed. Just the general sentiment there is, again, just look ahead. See who can help you win a championship, either immediately or down the line if you're going to get there.
Right. Yeah. This is the time to make those moves. And let me see.
Oh, sorry, friend of the show, Austin Eckler. Sorry.
Oh, I was going to say, yeah. I was surprised you knew who we were talking about there.
Yeah, I kind of went in and out on that
one. Okay. Got the camera here for 5 seconds so we can sign off. It's probably about to die again. But, guys, that will do it for this episode of Off the Bench. Thank you for tuning in. Hopefully we set you guys up for some fantasy success the rest of the way. And remember, tweet at us, do whatever to let us know what players you are thankful for this holiday season. Pat, hope you have a great Thanksgiving. Hope the entire Off the Bench fam has a great Thanksgiving.
Yes, guys. Usually I say something blasphemous at this point, but I will say happy Thanksgiving to those who celebrate. We are thankful for you guys that watch, that listen, follow us on any of our social media accounts. We appreciate you a lot. My concern was that we were just going to be 2 white dudes talking to no one. And we're almost that. Like we're only 1 tier above that. But the fact that we've got the listener base that we have is really awesome. It's such a thrill, and we hope you guys have a great holiday with your family and enjoy some football. Football. Not good football. Not all good football, but some football.
Yeah.
Some football on Thursday. And enjoy Friday night football as well.
Yes, there is some football on. So go and watch that. Spend some time with your family. Eat some good food. And, guys, we'll see you next week. For Pat Gustafson, I'm Brandon Carney. We are out.
Bye-bye.